Well, this is it. Welcome to episode 84 of series 1 of the Madaxeman Podcast. I think next time we will start calling things series 2 when we return after the summer. So this is your last episode for a while, unless we fit in a few more silly specials and things like that over the warmer months. There's all sorts here. We've got the quiz, we've got a rant, we've got painting, we've got gaming, we've got discussions about adult venues on main motorways in the UK. All the usual rubbish. There's even a bit of bird song, so listen out for that as well. So a textbook classic episode with all the usual ingredients. So sit back, pin back your ears and enjoy the Madaxeman Podcast.
This means war. This means war.
Well, look, we are here. There's currently a team of 6, and then we've got a 7th dial-in specialist who'll be joining us in about 10-15 minutes as well, which will give us the full set of 7 for I think we decided this is probably the last proper, if the word proper can really be applied to anything that we do here on the Madaxeman Podcast, the last proper podcast before a summer hiatus, as finally the torrential rain in the UK appears to be abating, and there will be some warmth and sunshine and the rest of it. And in theory, at least for a couple of weeks, we're all going to be able to run around and hug trees and hug each other and try and do some face-to-face social interaction before COVID cases reach another million a day or whatever it is, and we're all pinged by an NHS app, and we're not even allowed to meet each other on Zoom quite soon, I suspect. But so yes, last one before the summer, but even that, at the end of this epic 80 plus episodes, before we take the hiatus, we are still in the same usual set of things. And as there's been I think a 3-week break since the last one, that means there's probably an awful lot of painting to have discussed. And the place to start when we're using the phrase an awful lot of painting is the painting demon, the terrain queen, the forest mistress, whatever. Here we go. Tamsin, tell us, just astonish us with what, how much of the island of was it Borneo have you actually covered with real terrain in a 1-to-1 scale in the last 3 weeks?
Oh, New Guinea, although the Australians did also fight on a couple of other islands, like Bougainville, New Britain, and indeed Borneo. They did right at the end. I've produced quite a bit over the last 3 weeks, as you can imagine.
I've actually had random people contacting me on Twitter going, "Have you seen how much Tamsin's done? Oh my god!" It's it's out there in the wargaming ether. So it's something certainly happening out there.
I did. One of the bit. So when I left you, I think I was about to start work on the plantations. And
I think you'd only done 1,000 trees or something, but you were moving into the next couple of
something like that. Yeah, and but sort of doing the terrain tiles for them. There was a lot of downtime while various stages were drying, so I decided, sod it. I start priming the MDF buildings and assembling them, and over a couple of days, you can see the picture. They can't. Got one.
So is there one particular company that you get these MDF buildings from? Because there's all sorts of different ranges and qualities of MDF buildings, isn't there?
The Far East ones. War Bases do a couple. Arse do a good range, and if you can get them, there's an Australian company, Knights of Dice, who also do some very nice MDF ones, but shipping times and costs.
So you have got them. So there's some Knights of Dice terrain here then as well. We're looking at.
There's no Knights of Dice terrain here. This is all Sarissa and War Bases.
Okay.
There's various huts, various such like.
Lots of stuff
there's
on
a couple
stilts,
of buildings which I actually ran out of the brown spray paint. So
wow, that's impressive. Excellent.
So I was working on this rain tiles and just find a picture. It's just showing
So these are
tiles.
are those terrain tiles with wobbly edges that are kind of bases?
Yeah, they're from Swiss Precision.
Okay.
Like for the plantations, they're going to be the trees are going to be plants going to be regularly spaced. So I'd say go with squares. So you can see just a couple of progress shots there showing with static grass, without static grass.
Yeah, and then there's a bit of pizza topping on there as well.
And then so that's banana plantation.
That is a banana plantation, isn't it? Yes.
Covering 2 foot by 2 foot square.
4 square feet of banana trees. Wow.
Yep.
I've some skirmish games play on 4
if
by
you look
4.
where the cursor's pointing, that's a 28mm figure.
There's a little geezer in there. Yes, no, I can see it. Yeah, I can see his hands. Wow. Yep. No, he's not going to be short of potassium, is he? At any point in his daily diet.
Yeah, and so with the potassium and I think there's iodine, he'll also be slightly radioactive.
Yes, he will. Yeah. But no chance of scurvy at all. He'll be scurvy free.
Well, that's sort of everything. Sort of all the tiles there. Stacked.
And that looks like you've got 2 really useful box inserts.
Yeah.
That have got special slots in to hold your banana trees.
Yes.
So they can be densely packed and then they come out onto the bases and they're slightly less densely packed.
Yes.
Is there actually a game involved in where you take the bananas and put them in the holes on the board? It's like some sort of
it's banana-based
version of Banana Go, is it? Or something like that?
Banana Sudoku, I think.
Sure,
it's like,
somebody could
get extra points if you get them all in a row.
Yeah.
Plantationville.
Banana Connect 4. Connect 4.
Is it part of the pre-game? Some people do like deployment and everything else. You get to like banana deployment.
Yeah. This is going to be it. It's going to be the new Too Fat Lardy set, isn't it? There's going to be a pre-game banana phase or something.
Yeah. Tamsin, I've got to say, like, when I look at your painting output, I started off by being impressed. Then I started getting worried. And now I'm looking at you having 4 square foot of banana plantation. I've got to say, have you ever considered getting help?
Yeah, it's just gone a bit bananas.
Yeah, indeed.
Oh, and with that, Andy's arrived. Peter, you jumped in and did Andy's joke just as he's arrived. Hello, Andy.
Yeah.
Hello.
We're doing your jokes for you now. Look at that.
Yeah.
Right.
And sort of proving that I've gone totally off my coconut, 2 foot by 4 foot coconut plantation.
2 foot by 4. So 2 foot by 2 and 2 foot by 4.
But do you have special fragmentation rules for the coconuts landing on people?
No, I don't. But could you? I possibly should.
You
should. More people get killed by coconuts than sharks.
Well, those Japanese tanks are probably vulnerable enough that if a coconut fell on them, from the upper armor.
Yeah.
Oh no, those are Matildas, aren't they? I think.
Those are Matildas. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to say a berry's not going to stop a coconut.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going into a tree-based fruit discussion, which is going slightly off wargaming topic.
Yeah.
If you've got 240 coconut trees, how many coconuts do you need?
It's only 7. It's 2 foot by 4 foot. The tiles will take 72
trees,
coconut palms.
Right.
Okay, so that's
but how many bounty bars is that?
I think it's just a lovely bunch, Peter. It's a lovely bunch.
Yeah.
That's all you can say about it. Wow.
And then you can become a supplier of hipster coconut water for all the new modern age people.
Yeah, possibly.
It's your new side business.
Yeah. So let's take a photo just showing the tiles without the trees on. I also did because the plantations in New Guinea weren't being tended, they got a bit overgrown, so I added some insert bases for secondary jungle growth.
Yep.
You could also call that sort of like shell damage, because it looks like
it looks like shell holes.
Yeah. Can do. Yeah. Bit too regular. Bit too regular.
Are you going to enter your battlefield for Hampton Court next year, or Bisley on one of those?
Yeah, that might be an idea. Then once plantations are out of the way, I started working on some other terrain. So some kunai grass patches.
Is that the stuff that's in that that really arty film by I can't remember the name of the director, that's got loads of famous Hollywood actors in? Is it like the Big Red or something? No, it's like an arty Second World War.
Big
film.
Red One.
It's not Big Red One.
No, Thin Red Line.
Thin red line. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. It's from the book.
Okay. So yeah, that's the sort of grass that they all wade through there. So
Yeah.
those
elephant
people is
grass.
probably Sean Penn.
Is that the grass that
Not
cuts?
elephant grass, it's kunai grass. So it's different. It's similar. Can actually grow for much taller than elephant grass, I think.
So I'm really telling the difference at 28 mil.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Is that the grass? that
Well,
shreds
you
you
do.
down?
I was like going, it's grass.
Yeah.
Is it mown? No. Therefore, it's big grass.
Yeah.
Jesus, it's huge.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome.
This means war. This means war.
So, and then you've got your little geezers in there. And what rule set are they going to be playing when they fight their
Well,
way
it's, going
through
to
this
be, it's
terrain?
going to be chain of command.
Excellent. Okay, I can talk intelligently about that now. In the last 3 weeks, we
Have a
can come
couple
on
of
to that
games.
later. Exactly. I'm now the world's greatest expert, allegedly, but fantastic.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
that's superb.
So you can see I've the last couple of photos that you've seen. The terrain pieces. The larger one, most of them can easily hold a full section. A couple of them could hold two.
Yeah. So is that a section or a team, or is that one of the things that the rules indistinct?
That's a section.
The section
So it's 10-man section or squad.
or squad. Yeah.
And started work on bamboo.
Oh,
It's-
of course, we'd forgotten bamboo. How could we forget bamboo?
yeah. I had 250 sort of 12 centimeter
Bamboo.
stems.
But they come in 250s, don't they? I think, or like
Hundreds.
enormous 100s.
Definitely
Okay,
hundreds or 50s.
right.
And had
So
250.
those
and
look lighter
both
than the
three
ones that I've got.
bases
Yeah.
Used 250. So I've run out and I've had to order some more.
Because yours in here, they look lighter than the ones I've got.
Yeah,
think
I've
I've-
dry brushed them.
Okay, that's good. That's yeah, all 250. Did you dry brush them after they were based or before?
Before.
And that was with a brush or with a spray thing, or
That was with a brush.
did you do anything to seal them before you dry brush them, or did you just straight dry brush for the
I just straight dry brushed
dry
them.
brush? Yeah,
Which
250
I've
bloody
done-
things. My God.
I've done the same similar thing with the kunai grass bits. I dry brushed those while they were still on the mat.
Yeah, I think I used about 6 to do some bases for some Malifaux figures. That was about it. But no, that looks hideously effective. Yeah.
Yeah. So as you can see, done them with these ones with pathways through.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, you can probably actually lose figures for real in there.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
probably could. You might not. You probably hear them toppling over when you go to put the scenery away.
Yeah.
But
You probably hear them being attacked by very small 28mm wild animals, I imagine, or something like that.
yeah, so that's all of that done.
Don't worry, they'll come out and surrender in about 30 years' time.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I've got that done. Currently been working the last couple of days doing a load of what I refer to as the chunky trunk palm trees.
Okay. Oh, there's another tree phase coming in. You've done,
there's
there's
more
another
trees
tree
coming
phase.
in. I've sort of swamp and primary jungle bases.
Wow. Okay. So when we come back in September or something, there will still be more tree stories.
I
to tell.
might have actually finished terrain and gone back to painting figures.
No, that will be good. That will be fantastic. Oh wow. Well, look, that's awesome. That's more. Each week I keep being astonished by how much we learn about vegetation of Borneo in the 1940s, and this week's been no exception. And talking about luxurious vegetation, Peter, your hair seems to be growing back quite well from your cut. A little bit of facial fuzz as well, but the mane on top is
just did the haircut. Yeah,
the headcut's
I
going.
can do the flow now.
Yeah, it's looking quite bouffant. And I hear there's allegations that you've actually painted something in the last 3 weeks as well.
Yes,
Or put brush to metal.
Yeah, I cleaned up some Myceans and had a bit of a brush up on those, and the army I bought, and that was quite nice. And rolling that out and having a go, and doing a couple of extra bits around that. But the most recent ones, which I finished off a mere hour before I used them on Monday, were my Chinese cataphracts, which were deployed to great effect and great capability. But there's some nice little Essex ones. I quite enjoyed them, putting them together, getting them all cleaned up and everything else. They're quite nice little molds. They go in quite nicely with the rest of my army. So they're quite enjoyable. I'm going on a cataphract theme so far. So the last couple of armies I've done, I've had cataphracts, and I'm starting to understand that, just keep it going forwards.
Yeah,
On this turning mark.
Peter,
Who needs to turn?
question for you, mate. Because cataphracts, I've got some, but not too many. When you say Chinese cataphracts, do they look different? Do they look sort of like East Asian, or is it just
the armor just looks a little bit different? So
actually, Adam, just to interrupt Peter there, we were playing in one of the slightly less well lit parts of the escape. So from my point of view, I couldn't bloody tell you what they were, to be honest. It was they were like blokes on horses. But Peter, go on. I'm sure they look lovely in the real world.
In the real world, I had the joy of spraying. I actually chose the right color this time, which that's always a win for me. I got the metal one because I'd actually seen a nice picture in one of the history museums. So it was like a nice sort of silver all over. But then they have the silk underneath sort of thing. So underneath the armor. So it was like doing that with a nice little red to make it stand out and a nice little red plume on top. It's quite nice. And then just sort of shading it, bit of skin tone and everything else. But
which army was this for, Peter?
North and South. North and South. I was doing a bit of Bournemouth practice, but we'll get to that in a minute.
We'll come back to it later.
But no, it was the cataphracts, Adam. They're quite nice. They're different to the ones I've got in, say, the Parthians and that, because they're like half armor. And some of the others have different types of armor with paneling or more silky type thing. It's supposed to be just straight metal. So, the ones I've seen so far have been different. It just adds a little bit of flavor. You're probably only going to have, say, 4 of them max most of the time, unless you're going crazy with Armenians or something. So it's interesting to have a couple of little different ones. They have a little flair one way or another.
Cool.
Okay, neat. And just going around the screen, and Simon, you've been, I think you put some new figures on the table recently as well. You've been doing some painting in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, so I purchased a whole bunch of Clive's, a couple of the armies off Clive's estate. So one of our friends from the club, who passed away last year, and I bought off him. He had this unboxed armies of the North. Charles XII army for the Swedish, and as people may, our listeners may remember, I have a slight thing for random Swedish armies and heavy metal. So I thought, why not? Let's paint up an army that with more Swedish heavy metal banners. So I've got a few more units have been painted up. So for Kings of the Battlefield, so this is like 18th century warfare, where normally you're going to have between 2 or 4 guns on the table. I've now got 8. Whoops. May have bought a bit too many. But I've also painted up some of the genre, so these first of the line infantry. So they're kind of quite nice. And then painted up a couple more cuirassier units. So all nice blue coats, the yellow cufflinks, which trying to do proper yellow is a right pain. I know Tamsin will say, here's how I did it before, using hand ground ink and pigment. They're coming out quite nicely. And these figures from Dixon's, it's the first time I've ever used them. They're quite nice miniatures. They're nice, sharp molds, and with a bit of army dip and things like that, they come out quite nice.
Okay. Are they the ones you actually got on table on Monday, or was that a different set?
They were different sets. So on Monday, I had my second game of King of the Battlefield, and half the army was from Lockdown 1. So they were the QRF miniatures from that far back. And then the other half of the army is my version 0 of the army, which is all from Lancashire Models. So the more 18mm style figures. So cheap and cheerful. They give you the breadth of the army, and then I've got the more better quality troops, or the more Swedish painted ones and all that. But like as you're saying, when we're playing a club in the deep dark corners of the pub, lighting's not the best. So they all look fine.
Yeah. I must admit, I was down at the club as well on Monday and got some lockdown stuff out on table. But in terms of paint, so it's a lot of hoplites for one of the armies I'm using for Bournemouth. But what I've just done literally today is I matte varnished all of these hoplites after rebasing them, and redid all the shields and things like that. And it had been niggling me about the shields not looking quite right with sort of ultra matte on them. So I bought some. In fact, I walked into Shepherd's Bush and went to Darksphere, which is now open on, I think, Fridays and Saturdays. Went down into the Stygian dungeon of that one and bought some satin varnish, which is not quite gloss and not quite matte, and tried the sort of test of doing some of the hoplite shields again, because I didn't want them real full gloss, but I just wanted them more than matte, and it's worked out quite well. I chucked a couple of photos up on Twitter and people seem to like it, so I've just had a session of varnishing all the shields on all far too many. I think it's probably like 200 plus hoplites, just to give them a quick kind of skim over with a satin varnish, so they end up with just a little bit of, looking like they're a little bit polished or a little bit different to the matte finish for the figures, and the gloss metal for the metal guys. And then I've been slowly working through some of those this is going back 3-5 weeks whenever we talked about it, some of the Merliton stuff that I dipped and rebased and done with plastic bristles for the spears. So I'm starting to get some of those into groups that can actually be based, because I kind of quite often I just do all the spears and all the crossbows and all the longbows, and then I kind of work it out later. But because I was doing all these and sticking them on lollipop sticks to spray varnish them and undercoat them, not spray varnish, matte undercoat them, I actually organized them how I want to base them up before I did them. So each lollipop stick, has got 3 crossbowmen for the back and then 4 spearmen for the front, and that's going to be a mixed formation. Or there's one, with 8 spearmen, and that's going to be spearmen. I'm doing the livery on it, so I've taken up a couple of the ideas from last time.
I saw the Norwich ones just now.
Half and half, blue and white, some yellows and greens, doing the reds. And then today I printed off a load of graphics for shields to stick onto the Merliton shields and start doing that as well. So I think they're at that stage that they will suddenly get done quite quickly after being quite slow to build up. I've got some 15mm ancient Spanish. I got hold of a Corvus Belli metal, I think DBA army from a guy at the club that are undercoated and are underway, that will give me, with what I had before, which I think was a Corvus Belli DBA army, a sort of a Spanish army to add to my generic sets of barbarians from beforehand as well. There's been a bit of rebasing, and then I've had this kind of chain of command flurry in which this unit, or this box of plastic soldier 20mm World War II Americans that I painted up years ago just for the hell of it. I have a suspicion I bought them at Derby when it was still at Castle Donington. So that's going back 4 or 5 years or 6 years or something like that anyway. I bought 3 Shermans and a box of the PSC plastic American infantry that I just painted up for fun. And I've actually played now 2 games of Chain of Command, which I bought the rule set probably 5 or 6 years ago as well. Never got around to doing it in the last few weeks. And that's inspired me to get the rest of these guys done and painted up. And then that led to a flurry of extra bases, because in Chain of Command, there's quite a lot of teams there's a 2-man bazooka team, or there's a 5-man team that runs a heavy machine gun, or a 3-man team that runs a light machine gun. So I got some of those bases from war bases with the cutouts for 1Ps, because all my figures are based on 1Ps, and rare earth magnets to stick in little holes in the bases so that you can magnetize a little fire team of 3 or 2 or 5 and just move them around much more easily. And of course I ordered it from war bases, then got them, then painted them up, then realized I actually needed some more. So kind of war bases got 2 £9.48 orders from me within like 2 days or something, which is just like, why did I do that? That's a waste of postage, bad planning. And a few more American infantry to do it. And then I think Amazon has just delivered me a Zvezda Bofors gun, which is one of the options for the American support, which was cheaper on Amazon with Prime delivery, so it came the next day, than I could find a Zvezda thing on eBay, which was odd, really, because you always assume that eBay's going to, even for brand new stuff, someone's going to be offering it cheaper. But I found one on Amazon from a retailer that was cheaper than that, so I've got to kind of glue that together and put that all together as well. So it's been kind of an eclectic few weeks of moving stuff forward and moving stuff on, but from 15mm medievals and 15mm ancients, and then this very strange bits of 20mm World War II and super kind of groovy basing, which has, you know, jumped forwards and got some stuff on table. So that's been kind of particularly quite unusual, really, in terms of progress, and a bit of refurbishment from older stuff as well.
This means war.
But, you know, talking about old stuff that's been refurbished, Andy, have you been doing much painting recently?
I actually got a little bit done, yes. That Persian army I bought from that guy on Facebook, which arrived, the one with the 12 tugs that we talked about last time. They need some of them need a bit of TLC to tidy them up a bit. So, for example, I've done a kind of wash on the figures and dry brushed over the faces again and painted up where the spears were a bit cracked. So and put magnetic bases on. So I've done all the infantry now, and then eventually I'm going to have to do the cavalry, but that might involve repairing a few spears and stuff, which is a bit more labor intensive. So I've kind of slightly parked that to one side. Meanwhile, I did manage to spray in the garden a couple of weeks ago 30 25mm spearmen, which are going to be for my medieval army, my feudal army, and wow. The also, since I was out spraying, I basically got everything I could find to paint. So I've got the Cruel Seas, all the boats I've got for that. They've all been sprayed, and also the Ottomans.
Let me guess, grey.
Well, I actually painted them. I actually sprayed them black, because I only had black spray. Probably would have been better to spray them grey, but
just
at least get some kind of shadowing or shading effects when I go over them in grey. I mean, the painting guide with it seems to be fairly picky about what shade of grey you do it in, but quite honestly, I suspect that just 2 or 3 different tones of grey and a little bit of rust and a bit of wooden planking and stuff, and it kind of look what they probably looked like if you came across them in a harbour.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So stuff bobbing around in a harbour then. All right. Okay then. Well, I think we just looking around the screen, we appear to be bereft of an Adam somewhere at the moment. I believe he's done some painting, but if we manage to establish contact with him again, we can dial him in later. But otherwise, I think Dave, unless you've done any painting in the last couple of weeks, no painting from Dave.
No painting, just working.
Just been working a work-free zone. So I think that rounds up temporarily, unless we come back to it, this week's painting.
Means war.
So look, after done painting, we normally go into the section on what games have you played, but I think we can probably do a kind of slight recap of our last proper, in fact, our last 2 podcasts, or the last 2 podcasts, were both York themed. One was us predicting badly, I suspect, the potential winners from our weird. Do anybody remember what football was about when that was exciting?
I don't think we're that far off our prediction for York.
We weren't that far off, I don't think. And
I think we predicted Julian would get to the semi-final.
Yes.
Yeah. Then we thought the ancient British would beat him.
Julian and Richard would get to the semi-final.
Yeah, but
they played.
Dave Allen did a spoiler.
Yeah.
Dave Allen snuck through. He was the he would be what the
Italy.
Danes or something.
The Joker in the pack, the Iceland.
I think we all had a go at Julian's no bar tie, and Richard beat them, and Dave Allen and I lost to them, which basically gave Julian the competition, I would say.
Well, I think Dave Allen was saying that if he'd gone for a draw rather than trying to beat them, he might have done that, and then points wise, he might have won the whole thing.
Yeah, but that's shameful, though, isn't it? Really, you can't do that. But do you think the ancient Brits would have beat them, Dave? Having played it, because a massed army of
ancient Brits there.
There was an ancient Brit. We predicted an ancient Brit getting to the final with massed impetuous swordsmen. Maybe they could have overrun the kind of crappy filler before the 6 camels did the damage. But
I think the camels would have just run. It wasn't a sophisticated army Julian used. You'll hate that, hearing that.
Yeah. Well, didn't the 3 armies with the medium foot sort of like get run over?
Sort of, yeah, sort of.
But wasn't those one of yours, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. But against Julian's army, though, Julian's army did have a lot of medium foot.
Two of the medium sword armies ended up sort of mid-table.
Yeah, mid-table. But I think Julian's had a lot of medium foot in it as well.
Yeah, if Tim or Gordon's medium foot monstrosities had faced Julian's army, I think they'd have had a pretty good chance. I mean, you think you'd probably get sacrificed to the elephant, to the camels down the centre of the table, but you'd have smashed hell out of his 2 wings and get around the back. And I think if you get around the back of the camels, you're there. And if you stick the chariots in front of the camels and withdraw, then you'd be all right. Yeah.
Yeah, bizarrely. So sort of strangely enough, our football prediction of the ancient Brits beating Julian's army might have worked, but unfortunately the ancient Brits didn't get through to the semi-finals stage. They had a nightmare in the opening rounds. I presume they were sort of like the French or something, got knocked out by somebody. Did they get knocked out by the Austrians or the Swiss? Didn't they? That was it. They got
it was on penalties. The French went out, wasn't it?
Yes, they went out on penalties. So
and they're the world champions. So it kind of puts it in perspective.
But again, it was good to it was good. We had an epic trip up the A1.
Yes.
Which was totally bizarre.
Pornographer's paradise.
Sorry?
Pornographer's paradise.
Pornographer's paradise, the A1, the as Alan Carr, the comedian, says, the horniest road in Britain, because it's got for some bizarre reason every old little chef, which for those of you outside the UK was kind of a roadside cafe chain, which makes no sense at all, of the 1970s, that we all would have frequented with our families, I'm sure. All of the closed down little chefs have been turned into sex shops up and down the A1. And really? Some of them are independent, and then there's like a chain as well, clearly, because some of them share the same name. And this is a thing. There's articles on the BBC, there's podcasts about it, comedians do skits about it. It's a thing, but we not quite realised how many there were. Because I've not driven that far up the A1 before, but they're every few miles. It's kind of quite disturbing. And then it's kind of American Diner world as well, isn't it?
American Diner was dreadful.
Yeah, you had the worst burrito in the world, was it?
I think burrito is quite a simple thing. But when the burrito came and the woman came over and says, oh, I'm sorry, I think we've given you the vegan burrito. Would you like the cheese and the sour cream? And she bought that in pots, which actually didn't improve it at all.
No, but I suppose if you're asking for something vegetarian and you're north of Lincoln at that point in time, that is taking a bit of a risk, isn't it?
They're not going to put a Lincoln sausage in there just for the spice it up. Yeah.
No, they might do. And we did see a Vulcan bomber as well, which was unusual. And
fairy gannet. We like the fairy
gannet. Yeah,
we like that.
Possibly one of the ugliest aircraft ever seen.
Cool.
And then it was kind of weird doing an actual competition in a tent outside with real people.
In a pub car park with a gazebo put up.
Yeah.
And it didn't rain. It didn't rain actually, did it?
No, it was excellent. Really, it was. I think everybody was so happy to be at a competition and meeting real people and shoving soldiers around. It had a really good vibe.
It was brilliant. It's just really good seeing everybody still alive, still playing, and lots and lots of new toys painted and stuff. And it's great. I just played Romans after Romans and Julian, and after playing Julian, I was quite happy to come 8th, I think.
Yeah, get done. Yeah, no, I think my experimental Thracian army was, it just struggled to deal with cataphracts really, but But looking at it, I think there was a couple of times when if the terrain had fallen a bit kinder, or if I'd had a bit more of the rub of the green against the second string troops, it could have done better.
Well, what do you think's the best thing for taking on cataphracts then?
Elephants.
Elephants should be good. Spearmen should be good.
I think.
Maybe in fact, Dave, you had your supported Romans. Did they manage to stand up to cataphracts, or did you?
They scared the cataphracts off, which was quite bizarre, really, especially as I had the 2 integrated artillery. No, strange enough, the only cataphracts I saw was the first game against Sassanids, and I was kind of chasing his cavalry round the back of his army and squeaked to victory by 1 point when I thought I was going to lose. But no, I didn't really get into much combat with cataphracts at all. I think that Sassanid army was the only cataphract army I saw. Other than that, it was kind of like Romans and...
Yeah, surprising. I'd have thought they'd take a few more of them.
I played Sean a few weeks ago.
The games that came up.
I played Sean a few weeks ago when he had cataphract army, and I had some supported heavy Roman infantry, and they stood up reasonably well. I mean, they were getting a bit battered by the end of it, but they held up long enough to enable other people to come and hit his cataphracts in the flank.
I must admit, even the games I played since with other armies as well, the cataphracts, they probably do end up winning nearly all the time, but they're so unmaneuverable after that, and there are so few of them in most armies. It's kind of like, there's 4 cataphracts, you feed them 4 things, and they probably kill those 4 things, but then it's sort of the end of the game, and it's not necessarily the cataphracts punching and then suddenly exploiting, because they just don't have the ability to turn and go chasing stuff around and hit loads of other things. They're expensive. So if you've got 4 things that cost 12 points and they kill 4 or 5 of the enemy, point for point, they're probably not not winning, but it just take up the attention.
If they're up against sort of like heavy legion, they throw in sort of like swordsman impact, that's 12 points anyway.
No,
so it's just same cost.
But
it's just I think you're right. I think it's the exploit piece that is going to be different. You've got to have a cavalry with it, be it heavy cavalry, probably not impact. Something that is like it's like the wingman trailing on behind. He's not as good as looking, but the cataphracts are the blue-eyed boys stomping through to open the way for him to go and stomp all the light infantry.
Yeah, I think that's it. And it was when there's nothing else with them, they do sort of end up winning and then going, right, it's time up. And
we did our bit. Well, what's the rest of you doing? Yeah,
exactly. What's the rest of the army doing? So that's it. And then we actually had going back to the competition. We didn't even have a curry, did we? We had fish and chips.
Yeah, fish and chips and
peas, cup of tea.
So it wasn't a proper competition if you didn't have a curry. So
we were deep into fish and chip territory. So we went to the Weatherby Whaler, which by all accounts is basically Harry Ramsden's but £4 more expensive. And
sounds like one of those shops on the A1.
Yes, the Weatherby Whaler. Yeah, you could buy a special pair of galoshes or something.
Do I tell my story now?
You can try and tell your story, Dave. Yeah.
So Sunday morning, one of the Northern players came over and said, I'm coming down to London. I've got 2 or 3 months worth of work in London. I'll be staying in King's Cross in a hotel. Where's the club where's Central London Wargames Club? I said, we're perfect. We're just in Camden. And I'll tell you what, I'll email you. Give me your email address. I'll email you and I'll copy in the Wargames, the Central London email, so you can contact us when you get to London and to sort out some games. So I emailed him. 2 minutes later, a shout went up and said, "You're Dave Saunders from the podcast."
Dave's got his own fan club.
It's like, right, okay, yeah.
Dave, did you sign your autograph for him, Dave?
No. I didn't have my book of scripts with me.
What you need is a pack of Dave Saunders playing cards. So, like in Apocalypse Now, you can each time you play someone, you can leave a playing card with them with your name signed across it.
With the same pronunciation of a foreign war games figure. Yeah.
Yeah, that could be it. celebrity beckons. So yeah. So for the rest
Spelt
of you,
out in cuneiform.
Just watch out when you go to a war games competition, guys. If you actually talk to somebody, they might suddenly be shocked at talking to somebody from our podcast.
Yeah, and I guess they're not seeing the Zoom that we do, so so they don't know who these people are.
Lucky people.
Yeah. So did he look shocked?
Well, they recognise you by the hairstyle, Peter.
Yeah. Yes.
Simple enough.
It.
And the golden figures on the table.
Yeah.
You've got to have a bling.
Yeah. No, that's good. Okay.
I had a dragon last time.
Yes, that's true. Okay, so let's keep going around. Andy, have you been doing your Dave Ray world in the last few weeks?
Yeah, we have. We've done a couple of different games. I've made a note of what we do here. I'll just briefly summarise it. We did nice one last week, Kingdom of Sicily against Byzantines. That was Battle of, I think it was Dyrrhachium in 1081. That was quite jolly. Before that, we did 2 Taifa armies, and I had El Cid, and that went well. Still generally good fun. Tomorrow night, we're doing some battle in China. He's found these various historical battles, most of which I've never heard of. But the one tomorrow is Song against Jurchen Qin. So I've got the Jurchen Qin, which never used before. So
yeah, that used to be the super army, didn't it? But I think it's been a bit defanged.
Very
now.
heavily downplayed, that army now.
Yeah.
Well, they don't
got
seem
rid
to
of
have
a lot of the impact.
They don't seem to have much infantry. The cavalry seems to be, a lot of it seems to be this shooty bow horse thing, but it's impact half bow, so that you have to bump them up to elite to get proper shooting.
Yeah, it's not as good as it was, that kind of magic double header.
Yeah, but they do have 4 cataphract, so
okay.
Hopefully we can hit somebody where it hurts with them. Yeah.
Good. All right. And Simon, what about you in terms of games in the last few weeks? Have you been making a few forays down the club?
Yeah, so I had my first practice game for Bournemouth. So we had a Chinese civil war. So we had Chinese warring states versus the Chinese North and South Army. So both Gordon and I were practicing our armies and using what do we paint over the various lockdowns. So he had his new chariots that hadn't seen light of day. So I brought a few of my other armies to come on the table. It's quite impressive seeing that many chariots and swordsman-based infantry come charging across the table. So we got a result. I think everybody in the army got into combat or into very close bow fire, so it was quite bloody. So I've got a few practices and improvements to make to my army list because Gordon thrashed me. So that was quite good fun.
It sounds like a game in which everything got into combat is almost the antithesis of the game that we played with my rebased Normans, was it? I think
yeah,
or Sicilian Normans in Sicily against your Ottomans or Ottoman/generic Arab.
Yeah, I brought those. He hadn't evolved to become Ottoman Turks yet, so they're the Middle Turks, so they weren't sure which army they were yet. So that was quite good fun. Yeah, where we had everybody go in contact. Then Andy and I had the second game of King of the Battlefields on Monday. So we played a smaller game. So we used, because King of the Battlefield is normally played on a standard 6 foot by 4 foot table. So we played a smaller game just using an ADLG sized table and cut the troop size down to the right size. And we had, a cracking game. Both of us managed to get pretty much every unit into melee combat, running away. Got a on-table flank march running, and then my army broke.
Okay, one of those.
It was quite impressive when the army was like, I'm holding, 5 units break in one turn. I went, So I guess we should go get another glass of wine because that's the game.
Yep. That was
it can happen. One minute your army is looking solid, next minute it's a massive great hole in your middle. It can happen to either side. Well, I did have to. The first 2 die rolls I made with the army. I was using my Prussian army, which I'd bought from Clive's estate. Were a 1 and a 2, and this is on a D10. And I had to remind Clive he didn't own the army anymore.
Yeah. Yes. Send up prayers to Clive. Indeed. Okay.
This means war. This means war.
Peter, what about you? You've been did you manage to get any of other than the cataphracts out? Is that your main game?
I had the Mycenaeans. I had my first out in the Mycenaeans, yeah.
Wow, how was
against
that?
Dan. Yeah, it was a good laugh. Really good fun. I was learning that a load of heavy spear needs spicing up a bit. So I think next time I'll stick some archers in with them and that. Otherwise, people sort of like go, yeah, that's great. I'm going to kind of run round you and ignore you, and you can just like trot round and chase after me and be quite boring. So
what was Stan using?
Was
it his Roman?
I think it was Egyptian. No, it was Roman.
Assyrians, isn't it?
He had 2 different armies. I'm trying to remember now. It was 3 weeks ago.
Oh, right.
I think his biblical army is Assyrian.
Yeah. But no, it was good. I kind of lost, but I had fun doing it. Got an army out and sort of worked out that I need to do a couple of bits. You know, Stan was giving me some advice about putting some bowmen in with the spearmen stuff, and which I used to better effect with my Chinese later on. But I was having quite a good time. You know, get them out on the table, try them out, give them a run round. So it was a bit of fun trying them out.
That's good. Well, at some point we'll have to have a Mycenaean off.
Yes,
that could be. Is that Troy against the other ones, the Achaeans against the Trojans?
Yeah,
because that covers both armies, doesn't it? I think.
Yeah, they do both sides, don't they? It's pretty much you line up a whole bunch of heavy spear and then just go at it. You know,
just roll some dice.
It's like, hey, bombs all around.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Adam, what about you're back online by the looks of it, and
hello.
We can either take any gaming discussion of yours or any painting discussion. We'll give you a pass out to bring painting into this section of the pod.
Well, it's both quite short, so I think I can cover both in one. The painting, I remember 3 weeks ago going, I'm still doing these bloody Swiss pikes, because I just haven't had a chance to really do painting. So I've done very little, but I've now got them. I've just been gluing on to the bases, so the bases are looking at me and they're all painted. And gosh, it's they look good, but ADLG, how ADLG looks, it's odd because usually I like, as a full game, I like how ADLG looks, even though there's not that many figures, because it looks like, sort of like there's a flank attack going on there and there's a clash in the middle and it looks like good as a battlefield. And when I did the Romans and I sort of like put them all out, I thought, that looks very Roman-y and they look good. For Swiss pike blocks, there's just not enough figures. It's not pikey enough. Because even sort of like 12 on the base, I'm thinking that's not telling me Swiss. So maybe once they're on the table and they're in the middle of an army, they're going to look good. But I'm looking at them thinking, well,
I think once they're in on the table, I've seen it before. I think Simon's had it where you've got them on the table and it's a nice big block of them. And they look quite good en masse. I know what you mean. As an individual block, it doesn't quite have that same sort of effect.
Well, there's 2 blocks side by side, and that should be, I mean, in ADLG, 2 blocks of elite pikes side by side is like serious, really. But it's maybe when it's got all the other units around it and they look like the centerpiece of the army.
Have you got the flags in place yet as well?
Well, I did. I put the flags on, but I didn't go for the giant ones. I went for the ones that came with a Perry, because if I went for big ones, they would be sort of like going from the front to the back of the unit type thing. And that would have just looked, I think it would have looked too big. Whereas the smaller Perry ones, although they're not massive, they are big enough on the base.
But have big flags.
Yeah, because
big flag.
On that point, my 15mm ones have got pikes at the 45 degree. So, and they've got big flags. So the pikes at the 45 degree almost make, with flags on them, 2 or 3 flags on each base, almost make them look like they're twice as deep in a way. So I don't know whether it is a thing about vertical pikes is just a little bit less.
I think the number of flags makes it look good. If you have 2 flags, we'll say one in the front rank and one in the middle, kind of offset to one side, that makes it look a bit more crowded.
Because I'm looking at the base and the pikes are up, and now I'm looking at it from the side. There is quite a good forest of pike effect going on, and the flags, because on the 2 bases I've got 3 flags. So maybe I need to do the basing, and maybe I just need to because I've got a bit down on them because they've taken me so bloody long. It's not their fault. It's my children's fault, to be honest. So perhaps when I finish them, I'll get them out and go, yeah, they look good. So that's that. And gaming-wise, I've managed to do absolutely no gaming whatsoever. So I've been trying to organise games, and I've been looking through my diary going, oh, Monday evening, no, I can't do it. Tuesday, oh, no, I'll bogger. I just, hopefully come the summer holidays when my children aren't doing so many things in the evening, I'll be able to get a game in. But at the moment, I haven't been able to play a game. But I do have a non-gaming thing just to advise the wargaming world. When
let's come to that after we wrap up the gaming then, because I think there's just. Is that just me left? Tamsin, have you managed to fit any games in?
I managed to get a game in on Monday.
Oh, you did? Yes, you were down the club. Yeah, you played Stan as well. What army did you wheel out there?
It was an Allen's against his Republican Romans.
Okay.
And it was an interesting terrain bit because there were two large woods in the centre on one flank, and he'd got a river down that when he rolled to see what sort of river it was dry.
Oh, okay, so not there at all.
It had absolutely no effect on it. And played it. I made a couple of tactical errors, but in the end, I shoot it. Because I took quite a lot of bow cavalry. And of course, his Romans were all armoured.
The small and hard up Roman army. That's very difficult in between two woods.
So shooting just didn't get anywhere against his infantry, and I didn't really have enough of the impetuous cavalry to do serious damage. I did some damage, but not enough.
Not enough, and went down on that one.
Yeah.
Can I just say on them armies, the vagaries of history are really, really weird because. If your name's Alan and you do wargaming and you don't have an army of Allans, there's something wrong with you. Because it's like, imagine, right, that in the sort of like 5th century, accompanying the Huns, there was a tribe of Daves sweeping across Europe. You know what I mean? So now you have lots of Dave armies playing. It's
actually,
like, anybody called Francis has to have an army of Franks.
If there'd been an army of Daves, every wargame manufacturer would have been rich because there are so many bloody Daves to play war games, aren't there? Everybody would have had one.
The name Allen comes from the Allens.
I suppose it does.
The Romans captured Allens in Brittany. It's part of the Roman army, and that's where the name Allen comes from.
And the name Frank comes from...
Yeah.
Well, how many war gamers called Norman are there then?
Fair point.
I actually played against Stan's Republican Romans, and my cataphracts had great fun stomping. So ate them up.
There's the theme
straight through.
Yeah.
There's definitely.
And you can also back up and charge back in again using your impact.
Didn't need to.
Oh, okay.
No, just chew through.
This means war.
Well, I think my last few weeks, I'd say York was interesting. It was kind of a fun weekend using this medium foot Thracian army, as we mentioned, that didn't quite work, which I didn't sort of expect it to, but I'm glad I got the figures on table, I think, and I gave people some interesting tactical challenges until they won for a short period of time. But over the last few weeks, I've had 2 games of Chain of Command, which is a very interesting, wildly popular skirmishy World War II system. So that with these 20 mil guys, and it's really interesting learning a brand new system with a totally different set of mechanics, and it's trying to work out whether I'm learning, I'm getting tripped up by learning mechanics or getting tripped up by that difference of Second World War tactics to ancient tactics, because ancients and Renaissance games and even Napoleonic games are kind of lining up and committing troops and overwhelming people and getting into combat and forcing the issue and getting the opponent off balance, whereas you kind of go into it with that sort of mentality into almost every other game and think, yeah, I've got to be on the front foot and I've got to be going forwards, and the rules will reward that. And then I've been finding that no, this is the World War II game. You're starting with sort of equal forces, and you need to kind of engineer a 3-1 advantage somehow in one area to make it sensible, and that's kind of hard on a 4 foot wide table or a 6 foot wide table even. And then so I've lost the first 2 games, which basically both the same of them, and my Americans tried to advance into Germans, who then suddenly appear with MG-34 teams and shred them at the key moment, and then appear with support artillery and shred them as I try to advance towards defended positions. So after 2 games, I've kind of learned, actually, even though I'm supposed to be attacking in this scenario, I need to wait and just shell them repeatedly for a long period of time to erode them down before I even order my guys to get moving. And it's one of those sets of rules that's kind of written quite almost sort of conversationally. It's not got that terminology with this as a term in italics, and there's all this sort of bit over, is it a team or a squad or a section or a platoon, or and I'm struggling with that. And then there's things about turns as well. So it really, actually, my conclusion is, which I think everybody else who's played it has already worked out, is it needs to be played almost as a mini campaign, and there's a lot of mini campaigns for it, because then the campaign of playing 5 or 6 games with a theme allows the Allied side to bring in more fresh reinforcements, and then the Germans have to do that German thing of not having very many men, but they're very good and they've got to protect them and they've got to fall back, and the Germans then have to have, strategically or tactically, sometimes it's the right option for the Germans to pull back because they're taking a few casualties, whereas if you just play it as a one-off game, the Germans sit there and will win, or the Americans need to just bring up artillery and pound the Germans from a long distance.
So fairly realistic then.
It's like really, it's realistic. It's kind of,
so about between 50 and 60% of all casualties were either artillery or mortar.
It could well be, and it's
no,
a
it
weird
was.
thing. It is, it's a weird.
It was.
I'm saying, absolutely. I'm saying it is, but it's such an odd thing to try and get your head around, or it makes you reflect on some of the other rules that we play. Is that a difference between ancient and big battles lining up warfare, or is it that the Second World War and modern rules I've played before have been kind of tweaked to make attacking and being on the front foot and getting into combat more effective, because that's kind of fun? Because
it might also be a question of scale, where it's skirmish game, hiding in the building, hiding in the woods and shooting is probably a good thing, whereas something like Blitzkrieg Commander, where you're looking at far bigger, actually taking the initiative, pounding somewhere with artillery and rolling through with your tanks, and doing that, grabbing and keeping the initiative, might work better, because it's sort of like there are more resources to pour in, if you see what I mean.
I think it might be, but I've still I've only played 2 bloody games. So, but my question to myself is, my other games have been, BKC, Cold War Commander, and PBI, the Peter Pig game, and the scenarios in Blitzkrieg Commander and the scenarios or the game setup in PBI, PBI's got a countdown mechanism that each pair of turns you roll a dice and add it to the turn counter, and when that gets to 21, it's over. So if you're the attacker, you do start with a big, a numerical advantage in troops just about, and you start with more stuff on table, and the other guy brings more reserves on. But you have to push on, because at any turn, you roll 2 6s and suddenly you've added 12 to the turn counter, and you're getting towards 21. And there's going to be.
When I played Flames of War,
you played a lot of that.
The old version, not the current one. I haven't played the current one, but the previous one, the artillery could be used to great effect. I had an American army, and that was great fun. But because you had objectives to take and different scenarios per battle, you could be on the defensive, and then they simulated that by you had other forces turning up, and the same with the attacker. You'd arrive in different bounds, so it made it a little bit more interesting from that aspect. And so the artillery could have an effect, but you had to work out. Some people didn't like it because with the Rangers having artillery on the table, it was just a bit too close and things like that, which is understandable. But I thought it worked quite nicely. Some thought it was a bit overpowered, but
did the game balance with Flames of War is obviously hugely, or is hugely popular, but I've not played it. So did the game balance encourage you to get forward and get into hand-to-hand combat?
It depends on your troop type. So you could actually choose different troops. Some would be better at defending, some would better assault, some if you just threw them forward, then 9 times out of 10 it's not going to work that well. Even if you're going forward with the shock troops, they could still bounce off because you want to suppress the enemy. So you want to get a couple of suppressions on there, be it from artillery or fire, to get the heads down effectively when they're going in, because otherwise they can have extra firepower at you, which I thought was a pretty good setup. So either obscuring them with smoke or pounding them with the artillery a bit. So even if you didn't kill them, you had them suppressed.
But even that smoke's an interesting thing. Smoke's obviously something you can do or the British particularly can do, I understand, in Chain of Command. And Tamsin, you played much more of this, I guess, than I. But there's almost feels like there's the best tactics are the historical tactics, and those historical tactics are about winning with minimizing your own casualties and risk, which you take that to one logical.
Depending on nationality,
Depending on nationality, maybe there's the Japanese and the
Japanese,
Russians did the whole charge forward.
The best thing.
Just keep driving them forwards. But it feels like with Germans against Americans, there's a component I haven't really worked out, and this may just be wrong, is that the way to win is to adopt a set of tactics and playstyle that will actually make the game fairly miserable for your opponent.
Well, no, it's more counterpunch. It's sort of like, it works how it's supposed to. You've got to have that concentration of effort. And if they respond and you've done a feint, pulling back to basically suck them into an ambush, a trap that you've set up, which they have to then come into terrain that's a disadvantage of them and this and the other. That becomes a lot more tactical game. So you're actually thinking more like 3D chess and everything else.
Is the scale of the game, is it like a platoon versus platoon patrol-y type thing going on?
That's literally it,
it's platoon.
Then there really shouldn't be too much of an advantage. It should be sort of like, okay, if it's equal type of forces, it should be kind of cagey, really. Because like what you said about PBI, it is set up that one side's the attacker with more resources and told to crack on and you've got to push through. Now, even when you talk about, it's World War II, the Russians did that, the Japanese did that. Well, no, it's like the Americans and the British in Normandy. They took horrendous casualties pushing on through. So if the game's set up with lots more resources, but if it's supposed to be a relatively fixed front with two platoons feeling each other out, then that is going to be a sort of like slower, not sure what's going on here. I don't want to go running over there. I might get shot type thing.
Where
you
interesting
pin someone and then flank.
That's pre-game setup thing's really important as well. That I've clearly not got my head around, but I'm starting to understand.
The patrol phase.
Yeah, the patrol phase is really important.
But when you read the accounts in World War II, even in Normandy, where there was horrendous casualties, certainly the Brocage and everything else, when you read like the accounts from some of like the lieutenants and sergeants and that level, the platoon level, a lot of it where you could literally have a big sort of concentrated, very small battle, one platoon versus another, and literally the next hedge over, there's nothing happening. Because the thick brocage and separation of communication. So you could actually have that, platoon by platoon. I mean, some of the larger ones, great, Cobra and everything else, the breakout and things, it's different. But, when you read some of the accounts, it conveys across the whole lack of communication, the fog of war, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I think I'm really fascinated by it, and I really like it. And it's interesting because it's a puzzle that my mind's trying to work out how to become better at it, which is brilliant. But a big part of that puzzle, which I didn't really expect, and maybe this is what I'm just trying to articulate here, is I'm having to retrain my expectations about how the game will play out, because we've all spent so long playing big bat and ancient games where I think the phrase is you've got to break some eggs. Particularly even the new version of ADLG is probably a bit more along the line of you've got to take some risks to win the game, and you are going to lose some casualties to win the game, and you've got to put troops into combats that they could win and they should win, but they still could lose, and that both sides are taking risks with that. And one of the things I think we all like about ADLG that had kind of gone wrong with Fog before it, and even DBM before it, was that those rules had got to a stage at which you could win the game without taking any risks, or a good player could win those games without taking any risks. Whereas ADLG, you can still get battered by the dice, and if somebody lines up troops solidly in a few lines and doesn't give away flanks, you can be relatively competent just by doing fairly simple tactics. Yet the tactics are quite sophisticated. They're not keep 3 solid lines, protect your flanks, then no matter how clever the other person is, they're just going to have to steam in and roll some dice and you might win. This is, the tactics are actually quite complicated, and it's trying to engineer a position at which it's hard to get to a stage that the other person doesn't really have much chance, and you're trying to tip the odds, which is, I'm having to retrain my mind, on my wargaming mind, to think about it, which is really interesting. It's a real head scratcher. So, but no, I'm enjoying it, and I think hopefully Jeff, who I played the first game against, our clubmate, doesn't listen to this podcast with a bit of luck, and he won't then know that I've played another game against Don, Mr. Avis, and hopefully learnt a lot more. So next time I turn up to play Jeff, I'll be 2 games in, and he'll think I'm only 1 game in, and my Americans could do loads of cool stuff. So
well, Jeff's a good player anyway. He and I used to play Rommel before lockdown and before he got ill. And I know it's a different scale, but Rommel also is interesting mindset for World War II, in that you can only have 3 units in a square. So you can never gang up more guys. The only way you get higher odds is by throwing artillery and support in, which costs resources which are finite. But you very rarely pile into a battle, smack the enemy and take the place and then say, right, let's move on. You have to hammer away at them. And while you're doing that, you've got to think of, how can I put threats in other areas so they can't keep reinforcing them and recycling units, or stop them coming around your flank or whatever. So you are thinking more in a kind of macro level. And meanwhile, you're using up your command dice, which get recycled every so often. But there's this feeling of time and resources are being used up.
Yeah.
And I haven't actually got anywhere.
Yeah, no, I think it's just remembering that there's different ways of playing different games for different periods, which clearly is self-evident, but it's good to have that, your nose rubbed in that again every now and then, just to remember how different things work. So
does it do a sort of morale component as well?
Enormous. Yeah, it's all about morale, and there's all sorts of other game mechanics that about having impetus and morale.
That works. That's more realistic. You're having units break, and
you're more likely to lose in chain of command from your force morale going than from stuff being killed. You could potentially have your force morale drop completely without anybody actually being killed.
Yeah, no,
it looks like you've got to rewatch Band of Brothers, mate. It's just it's guaranteed. You're playing American. You just got to do it.
Is it on Netflix or is it on Prime at the moment? I don't know. I'll have I'll have to dig that
one
out.
thing. One thing that Peter just said there is a really good example of how you've got to change your attitude from Ancients to World War II. Because, like, being an Ancients gamer, we talk about, if you lose your morale, people run away. Well, no, in World War II, if you lose your morale, they just don't move. They just hide behind a tree and dig a hole, and they're not going anywhere. So it's like even the concept of breaking is a different thing in World War, or at least it should be a different thing in World War II. It's like people don't run away; they just don't move.
Depends. I've situations where troops did run away from combat.
Yeah, I managed to get one of those against Jeff when my troops ran away. But
not often.
Yeah, Battle of the Bulge, they ran off.
Either coming under fire, and you get because chain of command, you have the shock mechanism. So every time somebody shoots, so many hits, and then you'll see what the effect is, which could be a kill, but is more like to be shock on the team or section. And once you get team or section reach a certain amount of shock, it becomes pinned. When it goes if you've got twice as many shock points as you have figures remaining in that unit, that's when it breaks.
Yeah. So it's the kills do contribute.
When they're pinned, they actually gain an additional level of cover.
Yeah,
they become harder to hit.
Yeah, no, it's really clever, and I'm looking forward to playing some more and getting these 20mm plastics out that I kind of never thought I'd ever actually find something to use with them, and actually I've been using them against 28s as well, and they look okay. They look fine. Thing is, I think with those MG34 teams, they've never actually got close enough to the enemy to look. So the scale difference has been noticeable. So no, more of that to come, I think, in future weeks. But on that note, I think
small bit to remember. You've got the Americans.
Yeah.
Use marching fire and also use covering fire.
Yeah, and combat patrols as well.
Fire or suppression fire. I can't remember what it's called.
No, I started doing that in
you just
the second game.
Fire to across an area. It doesn't do any damage to the enemy, but it does reduce their ability to hit you.
Yeah.
Area suppression.
Doing that, and then also combat patrols is a huge thing.
You also played another game on Monday, didn't you, Tim?
Yeah, no, we had another game. It was in fact we need to be careful on this. I'll probably have to do some post game editing because this is my army for Bournemouth, and I don't want to give away too many secrets. So Peter, we could probably talk through that. So I was using my Sataic Egyptians, which is an army with lots of in it, and then quite a lot of in it, and then some in it as well, and it's kind of an interesting combination. It deploys quite interestingly, and and the kind of terrain I was looking for was so I did manage to get down on one flank and then two really small bits of terrain, and you were using your Mad Chinese as well, weren't you?
Yeah, my Mad Chinese with the bulletproof light cavalry. So
yeah,
it's like going through and trying out the cataphracts and how the spearmen sort of performed against them. Yeah,
and then all your medium swordsmen mixed with bow, who managed to stand up against my remarkably well,
and just to like dodge round to a little sort of like shimmy off to the right, and then stomp through your.
Yeah, with my dreadful command pips. But I think the highlight was definitely on the right flank when my unit of attempted to attack your two light horse repeatedly from turn one every single time, and I think you managed to rally them. I think it was 11 times. 7 times, yeah. 2 units. You managed to rally them 7 times during the course of the game, and it was only the last turn by the time I actually managed to kill one, which was delightful.
That was, made you feel particularly good about it, about that whole line.
It made me feel that, I think as was the case, Andy, the game I played against you with those damned
tea people.
see people,
Yeah.
gave me some tremendously good dice in my first game at York. So hopefully I've teed up some tremendously good dice for one of my games at
Note to self: don't play Tim first. Don't play Tim at
watch out for that.
First time. Well, I think they normally try to keep club members apart from each other, don't they? So
no, you may be safe on that.
I think myself, I've decided not to take the Scythian.
Right. Okay. No, that's possibly not the option. But I think for Bournemouth, once we get the lists done, we might do a special sort of half-hour one-off prediction podcast, because that seemed to be quite popular last time. So we might try and squeeze one of those in at some point.
I'm doing the review of them right now
to break our hiatus as list checking. So that'll be good. So
find out what Micah thinks of the list then.
Yes, see what Micah thinks, or whoever's the commentator who's popular in a couple of weeks' time. So possibly it's the Olympics by then, isn't it? But
yeah, it'll be Olympics commentator. That'll be the East German judge.
It will be something like that. Null point for Wyoming. And on that note, I think that's probably done gaming to death, and we can move on to the next feature. So that's Adam. You want to rant? Do you about longbows?
I can give you a rant about longbows, I reckon.
Okay. Well, look, we've got a competition coming up in Bournemouth, which luckily is yet another classical competition that allows us to get all these classical troop types out, which means that the growing world of whinge about longbows, as I sit here with some in front of me that I'm repainting and rebasing, it's kind of almost a murmuring tidal wave of whinge, isn't there? So you can hear it way off in the distance, like summer rain or a summer thunderstorm on the horizon that's coming in. And Adam, I think you're hoping to anticipate the wave of whinge, I suspect, with your proposal about longbowmen that heralds another episode of I'm Sorry, I Think You're an Arse. Coming up next on Madaxeman Radio, it's I'm Sorry, I Think You're an Arse, the antidote to informed discussion shows. At the piano this week is Scott Joplin, and your chairman is Sir Humphrey Humphreyson. Hello and welcome everybody to this week's edition of I'm Sorry, I Think You're an Arse. You join us this week from the Cerberus Amphitheatre in Nether Wallop in rural Hampshire, which is a real kick in the pants for those of you who prefer big city locations. Nestled gently in the rolling hills of southern England, visitors to the town can climb to the top of a nearby TV broadcasting mast, where they're greeted with a view covering 7 different counties. On a clear day, it is sometimes even possible to catch sight of Portsmouth off in the distance, despite the many prominent warning signs advising against this. Adam, what, the classic English weapon, we're in a world of where being English is now being celebrated, even though we lost, and longbows.
Well,
tell us about it.
I'll try not to murmur, and the thing is, I'm not sure this is actually a whinge about longbows per se. This is a whinge about wargamers and what they concentrate on and what they find important. Now, with longbows are a good example of this, and that is mixed up with English nationalism going back to Victoria times, where the longbow was a victorious weapon and sort of like we beat the French and stuff. But this is a really good example of wargamers concentrating on kit to the exclusion of other things, because this is how the classic wargame story goes, and this is what you see in wargames rules. Longbows, super deadly weapon used by well-trained troops, and they were just massively excellent and defeated mainly the French, but other people as well, for a period of about 150 years. And the English armies won the battles in the 100 Years' War because the longbow was so dominant. That's fair. Is that a fair summary of what the general belief about longbows is?
Until the end of the 100 Years' War, when the longbowmen got stomped.
Exactly like that. But for about 100 years, it was the longbow that did it. Right. The longbow victories, the battles that were the longbow victories. I'm going to describe them. The first one, and probably the greatest English victory in the 100 Years' War, what you had was a well-trained, well-commanded army fighting an enemy army where it's massively outnumbered. But this well-trained, well-commanded army was in a defensive position uphill where the flanks couldn't be turned, behind some temporary fortifications and behind some obstacles. It was attacked piecemeal by the enemy army over the course of several hours as different parts of the enemy army turned back. So even though it was really outnumbered, it just got attacked piecemeal. At one point, one part of the enemy army attacked another part of the enemy army before going on to attack the British army. You don't need longbows to explain why the English won at Cressy. It's just not needed. The English army won at Cressy, and if they weren't armed with longbows, they would have still won. Agincourt, you've got a sort of...
Sorry, so you're saying Cressy could have been a story of blunt spoons if the cutlery had been different at the time?
Well, maybe not blunt. They would probably need to be sharpened spoons. But when you've got a well-commanded, well-trained army in an excellent defensive position being attacked piecemeal by a feudal army that at one point has a fight with itself, you don't need a wonder weapon to explain why the well-trained defensive army won. And the same as Agincourt. It's like you've got an army where the longbows are on the flanks and the French start off by a small amount of knights charging at them. They actually charge through the longbow hell and they get stopped by the stakes and then they run off. And then the main part of the French army attacks in really tightly packed columns, not along the whole front, but really tightly packed columns in a really slippery field against particular parts of the English army. They get held. And then because they get held, they're too tightly packed together and they all fall over on top of each other. Again, it's like with such poor tactics, you don't need a wonder weapon to explain why the English won that battle. Okay. And what you've got later on when other armies start losing longbows, and they're well-trained longbowmen who can use longbows excellently, like the Burgundians and the French as well, towards the end of the 100 Years' War in the second half of the 15th century. They're not wonder weapons, okay? What you've got an English army that had well-trained troops, that was well-organised, that chose when and where to fight, defeating a feudal host. And when that feudal host became professionalised, what we now call the Ordnance French, when it became professionalised, and when it became a professional army as well, then all of a sudden it wasn't losing all the time. But what wargamers do is they look at the obvious, they go, well, it's longbows, isn't it? Well, no, warfare's a lot more complicated than that. It's sort of like, it's about command and control, it's about morale, it's about effective command, effective planning, which for large parts of the 100 Years' War, the English had, and to be frank, for a large part of the 100 Years' War, the French didn't. And when the French did have, even in the first half of the 100 Years' War, when Bertrand de Gusclin was in command of the French forces, he actually sort of like recaptured most of France from the English. Longbows didn't stop him doing that. So the longbows aren't a wonder weapon. There are other factors in play. But because we always concentrate on what happens on the battlefield, we look at it and we go, oh, wow, it's a wonder weapon, isn't it? Rather than, most warfare isn't on battlefields. So we don't look at the important stuff. Because, and even when you look at wargaming stuff, because I keep thinking, I've got to do an Indian army. I want an army with elephants. And how many people here used to play sixth? Anyone play sixth?
Yep, I'm here.
Yep. Do you remember the Indian army in sixth when you had medium infantry, irregular C, armed with longbows and two-handed
cutting weapons? I had 100 of them.
Yeah.
Lambing figures.
I mean,
that's all in a line.
I look at ADLG now and I look at the list and go, well, if they had two-handed cutting weapons and longbows, they would be quite good.
Yeah.
So again, this sort of like whole thing about weapons, it's like people go on.
They'd still have some shit medium cavalry though, wouldn't they?
Well,
that's been part of it for all
regular
time.
D medium cavalry at the back. But it's mixed, and it is mixed up with English nationalism quite deliberately in Victorian times when English history was being invented. And this myth is just carried on through. And it might be that they are effective troops. So kind of make them effective. But just to take this one unit, one sort of style of bow troops and go, oh, they're far better than everybody else, when they probably kind of weren't. And you've even got French rules that are falling for it. So, longbows, overplayed, not that important. They don't need all these special rules, I don't think. I think there are other reasons why they were so effective.
I think it's more to do with their professionalism, isn't it? That they were trained and trained and trained. And
professional troops.
At Cressy, it's a professional mercenary army being chased across northern France until they sort of decide to put up a fight. And then, as you say, the French are just a bunch of idiots.
Until they find a good defensive position and go on then, we'll have you.
And then,
well, you got to look at the fact that
it's nights. So actually, the leader is blind and charges in for no apparent reason with them all tied together. How does that go?
Well, I read a book recently which suggested that the way the French won the 100 Years' War was they developed artillery and a strategy of trying to capture towns, and that then meant that if the English wanted to stop them, they had to attack, and that didn't work well with their, type of army.
Well, what you got to remember with the longbows is it fires further and hits harder than a crossbow over a decent distance. So you can reload and fire a longbow.
No, either range and power.
The crossbow falls off after a certain distance.
Crossbows and longbows had roughly equivalent power.
Nah, not over.
I think you're missing the key point, though, isn't it? The longbow was an English weapon.
It was rate of shooting.
Invented by English people. And the crossbow was invented by dastardly foreigners. So, and it was a technology. So, but the other one involved English yeomanry being strong and having very large right arms or left arms.
Yeah, you've got to face facts that the longbows were the mortars of that period. And we know mortars are good. So, got to face facts. It was like mobile artillery.
Having a muddy field.
Tell me a mounted charge
is a big help.
Tell me a mounted charge. It was stopped by longbows.
Yeah, I mean,
there's plenty in the games I've played with longbows, for sure.
Yeah.
But in history, tell me a mounted charge.
Are you just upset that your mounted charge keeps being stopped by longbows? Is that it?
No.
You keep being stumped by longbows.
But tell me, again, it's a fair question. Tell me a mounted charge in history that got stopped by longbow fire.
I'm sure it would have been if the French had been competent enough to actually put a mounted charge together, just because that sort of innate Englishness would have, maybe they just would have been a bit scared and bottled it. Because they knew the longbow had really good factors, so
they were too scared to actually charge.
They're too scared to actually charge. It worked by deterrent almost.
It's a moral victory.
Cool. There was a French mounted charge which wasn't stopped by the longbows. It was effectively stopped by the stakes.
There you go.
The longbowmen had.
Yeah.
But I also think in the 100 Years' War, the English longbowmen ended up believing their own press and thinking they were really good. So by the end, they were getting a bit carried away with it, because I think there's who's the Duke who runs the English army at the end of the war? Yeah, I think that there's a big battle at the end of the 100 Years' War where they get completely mown down by the French knights who've worked out how to deal with them. And the English are actually believing their own press, think they're really damn hot and stand there and get run over.
Is that not an example of the actual genuine way ahead of its time brilliance of longbows? Because so many wars now are fought in the media and in the court of public opinion, and actually what we're saying is the longbow is a brilliant weapon because the English bowmen who are using it were the very first troops to work out cool stuff about PR and writing it back home in the newspaper. So that's part of the way the factor works out. It's just they've got their own PR team who do very, very effective PR in British
people
press.
used to get extra holidays to train for longbows.
Yeah, I think
so. I don't know what you're complaining about.
The reality of medieval warfare is, damn, got lucky. It was a really muddy field. Slaughtered the French twice. Believed your own PR, and then came a cropper.
And without longbow, you wouldn't have Robin Hood, which is an excuse for men to run around in tights. So, you're missing the whole thing there, Adam.
Back in the time before the English had longbows, Robin Hood had a longbow. No, he didn't.
Oh, I think he did. I've seen the film. And Morgan Freeman was his friend. He had a longbow as well.
It's not.
He had a longbow.
That's just a normal bow.
Oh, no, did he have a recurved one, perhaps?
Kevin Costner's got a longbow.
Yeah, there you go.
Actually, to be honest, yeah, that song is possibly a good reason not to lord the longbow, really, isn't it? But that did last a very long time. Everything I do.
Marion with the old age longbow.
That could have been it. Okay. Anybody else got any other longbow-based opinions then? Because, is this still the great weapon, or
it was still the great weapon?
Or are you just saying it's like meh?
The
really?
Renaissance. It was, when they were using it on ships, which tells you that it was a damn sight better than crossbows. And it was
like the harpoon missile, they were using it to sink ships.
Exactly, all those longbows found on the Mary Rose are pretty impressive, I think.
That's true. Yeah, they still lasted because it was that's the only reason that made the Mary Rose be worth disinterring, because otherwise it's just a load of wet sticks, isn't it? But they were able to drag up some longbows.
How many weapons, reality, that you practice so much that your whole skeleton gets distorted?
But that's an argument against them, mate.
What? It's early bodybuilding. What's the problem?
Yeah, it requires you to be hideously disformed in order to actually use it effectively. That's not really. Yeah, I think that's probably not a great design.
There was a bit of an English thing with secret weapons. They did it with the Armada, didn't they? When the British the English. I think I fell into the Adam thing of going British there. Apologies to the Scots and the Irish.
No, they're just English serfs. It's fine.
Yeah. During the Armada, the English cannons and the artillery were incredibly better than the Spanish, and they managed to keep all that really secret.
So then they weren't doing the PR thing then at that time.
I thought they just burnt them with fire ships.
I'm not sure if it was very much better. It's the crews were certainly better drilled.
Apparently, the French during the Armada, that our guns were physically built better. Our gunnery was better, and we could shoot at much longer distance. And the Spanish had no clue what they were coming up against.
Right.
Well, it was also There was also which downs for crew and possibly sort of sign of the emplacements on the ships.
Yeah.
The reloading time for the British was a couple of minutes. Reloading for the Spanish, about an hour.
Yeah.
Well, then again, that's the English carrying on that longbow tradition of being better than crossbows and moving into naval warfare. So that's the same thing.
Well, the crossbow was actually banned in England by the Normans.
Yeah, that's how.
Wasn't it banned by the Pope at one point? It was.
Yes,
it was
banned at one point.
Because it was a peasant weapon.
It was an assassin's weapon.
Well, no, it was a peasant's weapon for hunting in England.
And also, it was a peasant weapon that could kill gendarmes and the nobility. Exactly. And one doesn't like the high lords being shot at by some serf.
Yeah. A 2-point crossbow and knocking off a 15-point knight.
You gotta love that. 6-1. There you go.
You got to ban that for the places of the
apart from when Tim's using them.
Yeah, exactly. I'm painting and basing up some as we speak. So I think they do need something to be a wonder weapon, because that if anything that can help me win without actually requiring any ability, I think is something to be lauded and grasped at in equal measure. But I think we're kind of, as we got onto the Spanish Armada, I think that's possibly a sign that we managed to diverge from the topic of longbowmen. So Adam, in summary, bring us back to your core basic proposition.
My core basic proposition is this: English archers were effective in the 100 Years' War, and English armies were effective in the 100 Years' War, but not because longbows. Longbows were a decent weapon, but the English had a good run of victories for other reasons than longbow, and that's distorted how medieval war games rules are written to write in longbows as a super weapon. Okay,
then that's nice and pithy, nice and clear. Let's go around the table. We'll start top left with Simon, Mr. Renaissance Medieval. This is kind of the skirting the edges of your specialist subject. What do you think? Do you think Adam does have a point, and the longbow should just be it's a bow with good command and control, or is it no? It is something different, and you have an opinion about his resemblance to buttocks?
I agree with him. I think the longbow, yes, was scary. it was powerful, but the cost to train up very effective units to use it properly was so high. You probably only have 1 or 2 units of very skilled bowmen versus a whole bunch of normal bowman guys or crossbowman guys who are probably about as effective as a longbow unit. So if you had the right formation, you had the right terrain, and your flanks are protected, yes, a bowman unit or a longbowman unit are going to be very effective, but probably most other times they were good, but probably not that significantly different compared to any other bow unit. So I agree with it, Adam.
Okay. All right. Next round around. Peter, what about you and your luxurious hair? Where are you
I've
at?
seen Robin Hood men in tights. The longbow, they're still there. They're still effective. You can't put it down. Nah, it's just got the too much for marquee for it. You know, you're wrong, Adam.
Okay then, Mr. Saunders, in your cloud of whatever.
I think Arse, definite Arse. I think the longbow was the weapon which destroyed mounted knights and therefore has its place in history.
Okay. Tamsin, what about you? Where are you on the longbow? Is it a magic weapon or was it just well managed, well used?
Not a magic weapon. It's better than the standard bows that were being used earlier. I had better range and better armor penetration. Is it as super weapon as Wargames rules make it? Probably not that. Probably not that.
Okay, so we're 2 and 2 then.
How do you change factors for rules? Yeah, it's more difficult. So I'm going to go on the arse about it, but.
Oh right. Oh okay. Oh, I thought you were going there with the other way. So we're 3 and 1. Andy, what about you?
I don't agree with Adam's thesis, because why would English armies have so many longbowmen if they didn't work? And it did.
Because that's what they had.
Well, they also had men at arms and people like that. And there was nothing previously which had caused the end of mounted knights charging to the same extent as the fact that the enemy's got a load of longbows.
Yeah, there is. Swiss troops with what are now called pole arms and in keels and deep formations, they made mounted knights stop charging and get off their horses.
That was kind of the same era, slightly later maybe, but
not because earlier. Super weapon. It's because they could stand their ground, and they knew that if they didn't run, they could take on the knights. So they didn't have longbows, and they were just as effective against mounted knights as knights longbow armed troops.
I wouldn't argue against that, but the point is the Swiss and their pike keels and the pike formations.
They made the knights get off their horses before pikes. They got
that was later.
Pole arms.
That's later. The Swiss are later than the English longbow.
I think we're getting into another session, aren't we, about the Swiss are really cool as well. But go back to longbow. So Andy, where are you at?
The English never fought the Swiss, but that's why we play war games, because we just.
Yes, we did. We beat them a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why we play war games.
Army.
No, I think Adam's an arse.
The nearest army that you get to the nearest combat warfare you get either to English army against Swiss army would be Burgundian versus Swiss, and that was later. So it was when the Swiss had adopted pike.
That didn't end well, did it, for the Burgundians?
No.
All right. Okay. So does that? I'm just running around. So we're currently at 4 and 1. So I think Adam, I think I'm actually with you on this. I think it is all about organization tactics and a myth. And actually, I think there's another thing. I think it's just a very, very cynical ploy developed by both, first initially by English rules writers back in the days of whenever that didn't research it properly, and then it's been delightfully cynically adopted by foreign rules writers around the world, because they've realized that England is just such a bloody big market for this stuff. And the same thing happens with Flames of War, where you get British artillery stonk in the Second World War, and there's that's from New Zealand. There's all sorts of things where people pander to the British wargamer to to flatter the British and do it and flog them things. So I just think it's modern day commercialism, really. It's the rise of capitalism. That's the fault of it. Otherwise, they could just be bows with like superior or some other sort of factor.
Although I do miss the Indian troops with longbows and two-handed cavalry.
God, those 100 guys that I used to have, they were heavy infantry actually at one point. Oh no, medium infantry could be close formation. Sorry, I'm getting ADLG and 6th mixed up, aren't I? So they were medium infantry, unarmored, close formation, 2 units of 50, which gave you a really good hit count, wasn't it? It was almost impossible to do 1 casualty per figure on them because there were so bloody many of the bastards.
I've actually got some of the minifigs, 1970s 25mm Indian.
That would be the one.
Longbow.
And in fact, in what was it? Was it in 6th? 6th, I think 6th, the Indian longbow had their apogee because there was a pre-game thing and that you could challenge the enemy general to personal combat. And then the Indians was on an elephant, so that was always going to give you an advantage. So then the opposition general could counter challenge and say, we'll fight on foot. And then it was how the figure was depicted. So my Indian general was in his howdah with a longbow and a 2-handed cutting weapon. And so you get a longbow shot in and then go in somewhere turning. So no one ever accepted the challenge. And that always gave you an advantage at the start of every battle. So the Indians had the super troop as well. So somebody, maybe Phil Barker, liked to curry or something. And I think on that note, it's probably time for the music to come in. Well, as the flank march of time continues to struggle to find the tabletop of destiny, that's all we've got time for on this week's episode of I'm Sorry, I Think You're an Arse. We'll be back next week. So look, as the dulcet sounds of I'm Sorry, I Think You're an Arse fade into the background, we then have the equally dulcet tones of the what was topical 3 weeks ago quiz, as I think it's now rapidly becoming known. Andy's It Used to Be Topical in the Past military history quiz.
Question, comment les voir? Question, le trou est sans fond? Question, la légende le dit? Question, elle dit aussi? Question, c'est une maladie? Question.
Andy, what was going on in the world 3 weeks ago? The news cycle is daily now.
The questions were about York, if you remember. You probably don't.
York, okay, right.
So question 1 was, on the 8th of October 1918, how many German prisoners were taken by Sergeant Alvin York of the US 82nd Division?
101.
It was over 100. I think it was more than 101. And
it was 120.
He wasn't a sergeant when he wasn't a sergeant at that point. He was promoted to sergeant as a result.
Geek points, ding, 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 ding. Yeah.
Well, the answer is 132, and he also killed 25 Germans.
I was a couple off.
Yeah, and captured 30 odd machine guns.
Something like that. So, yeah, some huge number. They captured a whole. Yeah, so basically, he captured 4 officers, and they sort of brought their company with because they had enough. And ironically, he actually didn't want to serve in the army because his church didn't believe in thou shalt not kill. So in this battle, he killed 25 people. So he kind of got over his religious, conscientious objection vibe.
Yep,
sounds good.
Right. Next question was, what was the name of the sister ship of the British World War II cruiser HMS York, which featured in a famous movie about a naval battle, and which was sunk by the Japanese in March 1942?
Yes.
Wasn't the Tirpitz, was it?
No. HMS York's sister ship wasn't the Tirpitz.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay, naval warfare's not my big point.
I mean, it was a boat and it had guns on it, but that's
exactly. They're all grey, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
HMS Exeter.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and the movie was the Battle of the River Plate.
Yeah, that's right. I'm getting mixed up with Sink the Bismarck.
Was that the Tirpitz?
Scharnhorst, wasn't it?
Scharnhorst, okay.
Which?
No, the Spey.
The Graf Spey.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
The only one you haven't mentioned is an Eisenhower, and that was sunk by bombers. Right. Number 3, who, a strategist in Art de la Guerre rules, jointly with his brother, led the winning army at the Battle of York in the year 866?
It's got. I'm not sure which ones.
Oh, yeah.
Were they all called Harold by then?
Either Boneless or Upper.
Ivor the Boneless.
Yeah.
Right. Clive the Boneless.
Ivor the Boneless.
Ivor the Boneless. Right. No, I don't believe that's
Ivor
the
the
real one. I'll
Engine.
have to look that one up. Okay.
That sounds like
Vikings.
start of a pun.
Yeah, he's in the Vikings, isn't he?
I think it's about list 156 or something like that, somewhere around
Fine. Well, on 156, let's call in. That's nearly 248. Let's call in the music.
Question, comment les voir? Question, le trou est sans fond? Question, la légende le dit? Question, elle dit aussi? Question, c'est une maladie? Question.
Right. French techno fades into the 156 background. Andy, so we're going to do with this week's question, so that by the time this comes out, this might even be topical. And then after the credits roll, we're going to roll in with the answers as well. So rather than keep people waiting until the end of the summer. So tell us what you've decided is topical this week.
Well, it was going to be It's Coming Home, but of course it didn't come home. So I've resorted back to the English footballers' comfort blanket, 2 World Wars and 1 World Cup.
Okay.
So the first question is, Walter Tull was one of the first black British Army officers. Before he was killed in action in March 1918, he'd signed for a Scottish football club, which does, until recently, had a record for being a bit bigoted. Which team was that?
Okay, all right.
Right.
Next question.
Second one, Bert Troutman, the goalkeeper who famously broke his neck playing for Manchester City in the FA Cup final, had been a Luftwaffe paratrooper in World War II. Before being captured by the British Army in 1945, how many times had he been previously captured and escaped?
He did tangled up in the net, I imagine, or something like that. Yep.
And question 3, a World Cup qualifying tie in 1969 was a catalyst for what became known as the Football War between 2 countries. Which countries were they?
Okay, I think I've got a 10mm army for that. That's on sale on eBay as we speak. So, okay then. Well, let's roll the music, and thankfully we won't have too long to wait for the answers.
Question, comment les voir? Question, le trou est sans fond? Question, la légende le dit? Question, elle dit aussi? Question, c'est une maladie? Question.
Okay then. So folks, we're running into the tail end of this. This is like, normally this is what you're going to do next week, but this is going to be what might you do over the next couple of months, possibly. So let's have a quick run round. Dave, over the next couple of months of summer, I imagine there's gaming to be fitted in. There's a few competitions that you've got lined up, maybe some painting.
Bournemouth. Time. As many competitions as possible. I think there was some discussion of Lille. Maybe.
Yeah, going abroad still feels quite hairy, doesn't it? Even in September.
I fear we may be back in lockdown before we know it. But
yeah.
So it's. We've had 2 classical competitions. Well, when Bournemouth happens, it's going to be nice to get to some other competitions. I really want to get my medieval army out, which I've just painted during lockdown. That'd be really nice.
Are you playing in the London GT?
Yeah, GT is good. Looking forward to that. Definitely doing that. Hopefully, Iñaki and the Spanish guys are going to be able to come over. That's going to be really exciting. Be good to see. I know Iñaki is desperate to fucking play in competition.
Yeah.
Really.
No, I think there's loads of people desperate for international wargaming for sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Is there anything in the summer painting pile?
I fear I'm really pleased that the Legio Heroica guys are going to keep. I can't remember his name. Is it Giorgio?
Yeah, his nephew, I think it is, or son, is continuing the company.
That'd be a terrible loss to lose their figures. So I think I'm going to put an order in with them for at least some figures to bulk out my late Romans with the new troops I'm missing, things like that. I'm going to give up on Khurasan's Assyrians.
Yep, they're never coming.
Going to get it together.
They're the very, very, very late Assyrians, aren't they?
Yeah.
There's always something else coming in.
So I think I'll give up on that and do something different. I need a biblical army.
Yeah, find another one. Okay. All right, Adam, you were saying you were hoping that there's a hiatus for children's sport at some point over the summer, and then you're obviously organising Bournemouth. What else is on your agenda coming up?
Well, hoping to get a few games in. That would be good. Also, I kind of realised that November for Warfare, as long as we're not in lockdown again, I entered the 25 mil, and it's sort of like that's medievally. And I was thinking, I've got plenty of time to paint this French Ordnance Army that I'm gonna. But the weeks and the months are actually cracking on through surprisingly quickly. So I'm gonna have to concentrate on getting the French Ordnance Army painted, so I can use it later on in the year.
Okay. All right. Mr. Finkel, what about you? I think you're painting as we speak. You're just a slow speed painting machine. Will you still be playing Dave Ray and painting something when we return in September?
Probably yes. I'll hopefully be limbering up for the London GT that competition. I want to finish these feudal Welsh spearmen and the stuff I've got undercoated at the moment, which is the Ottomans for the Renaissance and the Cruel Seas stuff, and finish tidying up those Persians. So that, between that will keep me entertained. I'm not sure I'm going to get it all done because at the moment I'm not got a sort of massive painting mojo. It's bits here and there. So that'll probably keep me going for a couple of months, I should think. I'll probably still be doing these things when we next compare notes.
Okay. Tamsin, trees, buildings,
terrain.
But if we said by September,
recipe book.
By September I should have got around. I hope I'm still not doing terrain by September, jungle terrain by September. But
you're going to be looking at a lot of things on Zoom, aren't we? That are all tree shaped.
Can I just ask, is it going to be for a loot or something like that?
Huh?
Is this going to be for a show?
No.
You've got to dry brush all those pineapples. It's going to take you a while.
I have not done pineapple trees.
Hey, that's good then. So you're hoping to. So when
yam trees
get past the terrain, then what figures are lined up for the next few months?
I think I will. Well, I've got additions to my Yi Choson Korean. Thanks for the list. V4 list. So got the figures for those, and just need to get those prepped and painted. Probably do. I buy the figures for Japanese platoon.
Someone to hide in the jungle.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the next challenge will be finding them again once you've deployed them.
Yeah, it's a fuck are we brigade, because I get one of them. Where the fuck are we?
Oh, he's back. He was late to entry, but he's back.
Where the fucking hell are we?
Where the fucking hell are we? Peter, what about you? What's coming up for you over the summer?
Well, I've got some Mycians that I got some of that Museum Z range to sort of like have my Trojans going steaming in. Got the Brad Pitt figure painted up. Of course, they're all going to have to be gold. It's be rude not to. On top of that, I've been looking at a few armies, so clearing out some of the Spanish, feudal Spanish, because looking at them, they look quite tasty. I've got to sort out what I'm going to use in the London GT. So there's, having a look at how that sets up and how we're going to run that one. But the next tournament after that is Reading. So I've just got to have a look of what it is and what I want to have a go at that, because it's just getting back into the swing of it. So there's various armies I want to try out and have a look at and play various games. But the key one that's coming up in just a couple of weeks is a big Battle Empire one, where we're going to have a big game down at the club for a whole day. We're bringing various troops along to try a big battle that two of our club mates are setting up.
Oh, La Rothier, isn't it?
Yeah.
1914.
Yeah, that should be interesting. See if we can actually get up to some speed on playing that game. Yeah. Actually work out how to play it, which will be...
They've already worked out my style. I've got the Austrians. I get to go forwards.
Right, and that's it, just in a line. Okay.
Yeah, it's this. A lot of tactical nous in that,
Yeah. Okay. And then Simon, what about you? What's your next few months got ahead? Is it just putting different armies on table and bashing the Renaissance stuff around?
Yeah, definitely a lot more Renaissance, because you always need big pike unit to run around the table. Looking forward to Bournemouth. So my Lockdown 1 army, the 20 mil Chinese, will come out and we'll get to see their full glory of plastic ugliness. So they'll be quite good. And I've got the big lead chariots from, I can't remember who I bought them from. So they'll look really good. Get ready for London GT.
Is it New Line? Would it be New Line?
New Line, yeah. So yeah. Those are ones that you recommended.
The good value ones, yeah.
Yeah, and they just look proper and big. I think I'll have to get a little trolley to carry them. It's got 6 chariots. They just walk sideways.
Yeah, that's pretty solid, isn't it? Yeah.
They will look really good. So looking forward to getting them on the table. Got the GT. And then also just looking forward to having a few random games of either King of the Battlefield or something. They're not competition focused. You're actually just play games and blow things up and see what happens there. So that'll be good fun. Plus a bucket load of painting King of the Battlefield, musket units and more cuirassiers, because when you've got 20 battle units, you probably need a few more. So you do,
don't you? Yeah, for that 12 unit game, you've just got to have all those options.
And it's nice to have every possible option. So, elite, uber elite, these little ones with 3 tassels, 4 tassels.
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah, just mix it up for sure. Good. Okay. Well, I think from my point of view, to kind of round it out, I think, Bournemouth's the next biggie, and that will be putting a lot of either refurbished or never seen before troops on table, which would be fantastic. That'll be good. I think I've entered a 1-day 25 mil 100 point competition, which will be a first for me in I think the 8th of August up in Gloucester. It's one that Keith McGlynn's organising. So I've put in an army list for that already, 100 point, 2 commands, which should be fun. Get some 25 mil 28 mil figures on table and lots of short games, possibly very short if my army composition is nonsense, just gets run over, which should be it. And then playing a bit more with all the different 15 mil armies that I've got, just trying to use different armies down the club. That Battle Empire thing I'm looking forward to. Put some of my 10 mil stuff on and see how ridiculous it looks next to other people's 18 mil will be it.
They could be the reinforcements in the distance.
They could be the reinforcements in the distance. It's a theme here actually. My 20 mil Americans for chain of command, giving them another few runs out and see if I can get my head around that. I think there's talk of doing some BKC or Cold War Commander and other things down the club and getting some bigger games as well. And then at some point when things get kind of feel a bit more safe, to start playing some Malifaux again as well, just all the different systems. But then that's starting to be system overload, I think. And then painting, I suspect it just will be crack on or crack through these 15 mil Spanish and all of these infantry for my medieval armies, and then once they get done, it's a question of which of the next 3 big projects do I start. But that's a whole different kettle of fish to be decided nearer the time. So there's quite a lot going to be going on over the summer of different games, different systems, a few different competitions and things like that to look forward to, and we may well try and sneak in a few tactical podcasts, but otherwise we'll be on a 7-person Madaxeman Podcast hiatus until the weather calms down a bit, and we probably get to the back end of August. So thank you for bearing with us over the many last weeks, and listening to us keep ourselves entertained through lockdown. It's been great to be here. I think we'll actually have to start calling the next one Series 2, because I think I just rolled this one and it was Series 1 and we're up to about episode 88 or something. So we probably will be back officially with Series 2 in the autumn, and watch out for other stuff that drops between now and then. But other than that, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for downloading, keeping it clicking. Enjoy the summer, enjoy the gaming, hopefully see you across the table. So goodbye everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Everyone.
Oh, so Andy, we in this little coda, then we get to put people out of their misery, which well, that's not a comment on your questions in any way, shape, or form. Out of their tender hooks or something like that. We take them off their tender hooks. So fill us in with the answers on Andy's "I can't believe it's still topical" quiz of the week.
Right. Okay. Well, the first question was: Walter Tull was one of the first Black British Army officers. Before he was killed in action in March 1918, he signed for a Scottish club which had a reputation of being a bit bigoted. Which club did he sign for?
Rangers.
Correct.
Hadn't he already played for Tottenham Hotspur?
Yes.
And Plymouth North End, isn't he? Sorry, Preston North End, isn't he?
I don't think it was Preston. I think he played for Northampton. He might have played. I don't know about Preston. You may be right.
Maybe we need to do another spin-off podcast on 1920s football in the British Isles. You know, it sounds like there's a lot of expertise around the pod.
Sure. Right. Second question was Bert Troutman, a goalkeeper who famously broke his neck playing for Manchester City in the FA Cup final, had been a Luftwaffe paratrooper in World War II. Before being captured by the British Army in 1945, how many times had he been previously captured and escaped?
I'll say 5.
Anyone else?
2?
Yeah, the answer is 2. Once by the Russians and once by the French.
Oh, so he did almost the full suite of Allied powers then?
Something like that, yeah.
Did he get captured by the Americans later in the war?
No, apparently not, no.
Oh, right, okay.
You've got to admire someone, though, that sort of like breaks their neck and goes, no, I'll just carry on, don't worry about it.
Well, I imagine compared to being captured by the Russians, breaking your neck in a football match is probably not the worst thing that could ever happen to you.
Yeah, I must admit that I've had paper cuts that have made me stop playing war games, so and go home early. So yeah, I think that is a very good shout.
Right, and the third question was about a World Cup qualifying tie in 1969 was the catalyst for what became known as the football war between two countries. Which countries were they?
Was it Bolivia and
Peru? Was it? Or
no, it was
Honduras.
Or
Paraguay.
Honduras is one of them.
Honduras, Paraguay.
El Salvador.
El Salvador, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was tension between those countries anyway, and it wasn't the football match which caused the war, but that was basically what caused it, the spark to kick off, and there was a.
But I think that War Games Sabutio crossover is just a fantastic thing. I think Tiny War Games mats do Sabutio mats as well now, so it's all coming back. There's an opportunity to do that. So, no, I think thank you, Andy, for a whole other series of eclectic questions, and yet again, Andy's quiz will be back in after the summer hiatus. So once again, goodbye everybody. Goodbye.
This
means war. This means war.